I'm not sure if I need this, but I'm going to use it anyways. I'm the strangest person to start tonight because my name is Justin Smith and I'm brand new. I'm replacing Ms. Nicholson, who retired. She's been wonderful catching me up with everything, and also I know a lot of you have relationships with her too. I'd like to welcome you. The purpose of tonight is to talk through what this college process is going to look like for your senior. And I know all of our counseling staff is here except for Ms. Mancuso. Susan Mancuso, she's our director and she is currently homesick, so she's with us in spirit at the moment. But I don't know if you guys need introductions.
Yeah. If you push the next slide over.
Mr. Fitzgerald, over here. Oh. Ms. Carney is right here. Again, I'm Justin Smith. Ms. Colleen Lunkovich. And I said Susan Mancuso is homesick tonight, but still checking her email actively apparently. And then Becky Smock, who a lot of you interact with, is kind of our first line in the guidance office. If you're unfamiliar with how things are done here, as I was only a few weeks ago, all of us have our own alphabetical caseload, and you can see it on the handouts if you pick them up on the way in. As a side note, the restrooms toward the front of the building over here are open for you. If anybody needs to get up and go, please feel free. As we go through tonight, if you have any questions along the way, I would just ask that you hold them till the end. We're going to all kind of line up here for whatever questions you might have. The general agenda tonight, it's pretty basic, and just know that your student's path, it might not fit like a cookie cutter. It might not be for every single person in this room, but generally this is the process with college and career, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. No matter what your student's plan is, we're going to go over the SAT and ACT and just generally what those things look like. The application process itself, along with deadlines, which are stressing many of our seniors out already. Financial aid, Naviance, which is our online platform where we send applications, we send recommendations to colleges, and then finally tips for dealing with the overall stressors that come from this. Again, if we're feeling this already from students, I'm sure a lot of you are seeing it at home already, and it picks up from here pretty good. So what is your child's plan? I hope that by now, I think everybody in our counseling department is on the same page as it relates to college, career, and a plan after high school. Everything listed up here are things that we have advocated for a student, have had a plan for a student. It's just, what does your student want? For a lot of students, it's a 4-year college. For others, it's a 2-year college. There are other post-secondary trainings. There are trade schools. Military workforce, the gap year has been pretty popular in recent years. Generally, there's something for everybody, and it's not our goal as counselors to say, you should do this and shouldn't do that. It's our goal to be an advocate, to connect with you and help you and your student get to whatever goal that they're hoping for. We emphasize plans over anything else, so we just want to make sure when your student leaves here, what is the plan? What do you hope to do, and how do we get you there? And I'm jumping right into the SAT. To be honest with you, I've never been a good test taker myself. I'm not a big fan of the SAT, and I think in all of our experiences throughout education, the SAT has been so heavily looked at by colleges as an indicator of how smart is your child. It's not something I really believe in as much, but I call it the necessary evil sometimes because some colleges do require it. What I will say is with COVID brought about at least one big change, where a lot of colleges, they don't care about the SAT as much as they used to, and if I had to ballpark it, I would say that around 70 to 75% of colleges at this point have become test optional, meaning that they will look at your student holistically, never mind SATs, never mind standardized testing, they want to see grades, extracurriculars, leadership, and what your student does outside of school. But for the SAT itself, if your student is a strong test taker, if they're applying to places that require some sort of standardized testing, we encourage every student to give this a shot, try it, prepare for it, and just see how you do. Some students surprise themselves with their strong academic performances. Other students, if they were like me, they took the test and they were like, okay, it's test optional for me. This didn't work. The SAT itself, it meets several times per year, and I think a lot of students coming up have already taken this at some point during their junior year, but there will be a few opportunities to take it during senior year as well. The SAT is the one you hear about the most. The SAT is the one most commonly used in really the New England area. Most colleges, you'll hear SAT versus ACT. A lot of the New England-y type of schools, really kind of the majority of the country will lean toward the SAT over the ACT. Also called the SAT reasoning test. But structurally, it's changed a little bit over the years. Largely it's based in reading, math. I'm sorry, I'm moving on.
No.
We're also recording this, by the way. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but we're posting this online. So if you know anybody who couldn't make it, who couldn't attend, it'll be on the school website and it'll also be recorded. And this presentation will be up there as well. I should have said that from the start. The SAT itself, there's largely reading and math is what they pick up on, and then generally writing and language. For about, I'd say, a 10-year span, they had a writing portion where there was actually an essay you had to complete along the way. The important thing to know is that essay is no more. Students don't need to physically write that essay. I don't even think the option to do it is there anymore. It's gone. It's a $55 fee to sign up for that SAT. If you are free or reduced price lunch, you actually get 2 chances to take that SAT for free. So if you're a family who qualifies for free or reduced price lunch, you get 2 chances to take the test at no cost. Just talk to your counselor. Our guidance department has waivers and has the ability to provide you those waivers so that your student has the ability to take that cost-free 2 times. The deadlines come about quick to take those tests. Olive Reigns is a site to take that test, but only for November and May. But there are a few tests in between where there's about a month in advance deadline for each test. You can take it at any site, it doesn't really matter. When you go through College Board, it has you sign up for the test, sign up for this location, and then pay on that website. A couple just important upcoming deadlines, the quickest one's right around the corner. The October 1st SAT is the closest one, and the deadline is September 20th. That's the late deadline. For those of you who have a student who's on top of it and like, we're ready to go, we want to do early deadlines, but we want to take the SAT at least one more time, I would highly encourage that exam and sign up for it quickly. The seats fill up very quickly as well. Each site that you take the test at only has a limited number of seats, so the sooner you can get in there, the better. And then also, if your student is looking to apply to a program like nursing or something that may have an earlier deadline, it's a smart move to try to take that test earlier rather than later. The deadline to register for the November 5th SAT is October 7th, and then finally the December 3rd SAT, that deadline is November 3rd. Ultimately, if you are researching your colleges or your student is researching their colleges and they see that a lot of their schools don't require the SAT or it's optional at that school, and your student, it's going to cause more stress than it's worth. I know I, as a counselor, will say, well, we'll have that talk. Are you sure you want to give this a try? And if it's typically more stress than it's worth, and you're looking at test optional schools across the board, it's not like it used to be where it's like, you have to take that test. And I know I heard that growing up a lot myself, and it frustrated me a whole lot as a not so strong test taker. Just know that the rules of the game have changed a little bit, but we still encourage it, but I don't think it's pushed as intensely as it used to be. The ACT, different scoring system, different structured test, around the same time frames in general. The ACT, it was better for me as a student because there is a science portion, and that's kind of the big thing. I was good at science, I was comfortable with science, and this test allowed me to kind of flex that muscle a little bit. It assesses a lot of similar qualities. There's multiple choice that are broken up: English, math, reading, and science. Again, you won't see that science section on the SAT itself. These will be accepted in place of any standardized test at any college. It's just the less common of the two. The SAT, again, is the more common in this region. They still have the writing portion, so if your student is an especially strong writer, it might be another thing to highlight since the SAT doesn't offer that. $60 for the ACT with no writing, and then it's $85 for the ACT plus writing. I don't know why $25 equals writing, but that's the fees for this upcoming year. These are not offered as frequently. You can see the 2 deadlines that are up here. The October 22nd ACT and the December 10th ACT, those are the next two coming up, so there's a few more opportunities to take the SAT than there is to take the ACT. Again, this allows you to flex a certain different muscles than the SAT, so if you're a strong test taker, if people are between the two, I say give them both a try, see which one fits better. They score differently, but a college can sometimes look at an SAT score that lands about here, and an ACT score that might be a little higher because you scored more strongly in the science or whatever boosted you up there. So if a student is between the two, I say try both, see how it all nets out. And even if they're both bad at the end of the day and you're not happy with your score, your student's not happy with their score, there is still the option to say, I'm not sending these anywhere, I want to apply as test option. The three modes of prep, there are private tutors for this that I think a lot of families will find and use, but I personally like Khan Academy the best. You might know Khan Academy, it was math prep software, at least when I was growing up. It has evolved to become SAT prep as well, and I like it. It's free. Your student can log in and make a username, and essentially that software is pretty smart. It gets to know your student as a learner, and it can pick up strengths and weaknesses. It has a pre-test, meaning it can indicate what level your student might be at academically, and then bolt them forward so they're not looking at the basics for SAT prep, but it places them on the level that they might need to be at. Again, it's free, so it's not as intensive as some of the paid services. You can see the paid services at the bottom, ACT online courses, actstudent.org. The other ones that come with, you can Google a lot of these things too. There's different, beyond Khan Academy and beyond ACT online courses. There's Kaplan online prep and common names that you probably see and hear commercials for. They're fine, they're expensive, but they're a little more in depth probably too. And then finally, Bridgewater State. This link will be live when it's posted on the actual website, so feel free to go. That link provides you to some prep specifically for the November or December SAT. And that's a little more expensive, but that is probably the most intensive option that you can find as quickly as you can find it for the upcoming exams. And next up, Ms. Carter.
Thank you. And I apologize for my little moving the camera there. Mr. Souza, our media production teacher, had offered to help, and obviously I should have taken him up on his offer, so we're learning. So I'm going to discuss the college process here, and I'm going to start with kind of the things that we want to make sure the students are starting with right now, kind of the two things that are most important, I think, in our world a little bit. Teacher letters of recommendation. So starting last spring, we started bugging our students, suggesting that they should find a teacher or two to ask to write a letter of recommendation. We continue to do that, bugging them throughout now. So we're hoping by now students have asked, and we suggest they ask in person and use their please and thank yous to ask 1 to 2 teachers to write them a letter of recommendation. And there is a place in their Naviance account that they go in. It's part of their Naviance account, and it's called Letters of Recommendation. They go in there and they actually add the teacher. There's a drop-down menu with all the teachers in there. They can select either all their colleges, so it'll automatically go to all their colleges, or if they might be applying to a school or two that only maybe accepts one letter and they want to make sure this one particular teacher writes that school, they can specify that which college receives which letter. So that's one of the things we've been really pushing for, is to get those letters of recommendation lined up, because we're writing letters, but so are those teachers, and they have a lot of people asking them, which is why we'd ask them to kind of go early, because sometimes they're writing lots and lots of letters, and we want them to be able to have the time to do them all justice. The second thing that's most important to us right now is the student questionnaire. This is also in Naviance. It's in the top right under About Me. If they click down there, and I can tell you that we're going to be meeting with the seniors individually over the next couple weeks, and we are using one of our Tiger blocks. I probably should have started with this, but one of the Tiger blocks coming up on a Friday, where we're going to do this presentation to all the seniors as a group as well. But we have all started setting up individual appointments with our seniors to talk this all through, so don't worry, they will get this information as well. But the student questionnaire, under the About Me tab, they go down in there and they put in information about themselves, and that's what we use to write their letters, because Typically, most schools require the guidance counselor letter. They don't always require the teacher letters, but they almost always require the guidance counselor letter. But the great part is that information that they put in there, both we have access to it, the individual guidance counselor, and the teachers do as well once they've been linked. That's where we ask them to put every little thing they've done in high school. And this is maybe where you can really help them out, because I think a lot of times the students tend to kind of, undercut themselves. They're like, oh, it wasn't important, that didn't matter. Everything is important and everything matters, and let the colleges figure out whether or not it matters. So have them put every little thing in there that they have ever done in high school. Also, just because I can speak for myself as I'm getting older, I think I need to start taking that Prevagen or something. I can't remember. So I might have 2 years ago when they were sophomore had a whole conversation about, what sport they were playing or musical they were in. I don't always remember really well. So I need them to kind of lay it out for me just so I know that I'm not missing anything and I'm including everything I possibly can. What's great about the college questionnaire is also if there's other considerations that they might want the college to know, we can put that in there. So maybe something happened their sophomore year, I don't know why I'm picking on sophomore year, but that their grades weren't the best because something else was going on, and they want the colleges to know that. If they write that into their college questionnaire, we will work that into our letters. So whatever it might be, they can put that in there. And literally, I'll tell my students a lot of times, since most of the time the teachers don't use it, but I do, and I'm saying, you can write to me, like, Mrs. Carney, I was thinking about putting this. They can put whatever they'd like in there. So those two things we really would like them to get going on. Then the process itself. So college students are applying to, they need to put their colleges they're applying to in Naviance. So, and when they add them, they're going to go into the colleges I'm applying to tab, and when they put them in there, we want them to make sure they're putting the correct deadlines, because the teachers are going to see those deadlines, and we're going to see those deadlines and assume that's what they're applying for. Sometimes when you link your Common App to Naviance, it rolls the colleges over, but sometimes it rolls it over regular decision. So we want them to go into Naviance and make sure that if they're planning on applying early action, that they're putting those correct deadlines, because the teachers and us are going to look at that and decide, well, how much time do we have to write their letter? And if all their, say, regular decisions, so we know their deadlines are until January or February or so, we might put them off. And if they're like, no, I'm applying by November 1st, we don't want to be rushing the letter. So to make sure within Naviance, those deadlines are correct. Most students are applying through the Common App. And how many of you are familiar with the Common App? Anyone? That's a good amount. So, growing up, I remember literally typing onto a page, a paper page, and mailing into a school. I think it's great that those days are over and that they can do it on computers, but it's kind of brought its own issues with it as well. So the Common App, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, is a website, and it's literally commonapp.org. You can go to that website, and the idea is it's got hundreds, like over 800, 900 schools are members of Common App. So there's a good chance, if not all their schools, most of their schools probably are Common App schools. And the idea is you fill out the application once, and you can send it to any of those schools. So it sounds terrific, that, much easier. But of course, it's never really that easy. There is the main application they have to fill out, and that has 6 sections to it. And it's information, to be honest, it's very easy. It's mostly tedious. It's, their name, their address, their phone number, the language they speak. It's going to ask information about you, like what kind of level of education you have, where'd you go, where do you work, what's your job, how many siblings the student has, their activities, their test scores if they choose to send them, and there is a little on-off switch on there so they can send it to some schools and then turn it off and not send to others. There's the essay, which most English classes, senior English classes, will have some sort of assistance with their college essay. Whether it's an actual assignment in class, or sometimes teachers will just offer to meet one-on-one with them to go through it. So you have this whole application that you fill out, but then of course, every college will have its own question section that the students also have to fill out. And oftentimes it's simple stuff as well, what major they want, if they're going to live on campus, if they're applying for financial aid. But some will also have additional writing prompts. So they might have other smaller essays that they're going to have to do. And that's where some of this timeline can become a problem, depending on when they want to do it. And then counselors and teachers are going to send their information electronically through Naviance. So one of the things in the Common App, there is a recommenders section, and oftentimes people will try to invite us or invite their teachers through the Common App, but that's not how we do it. We send our letters through Naviance, we send the transcripts, all that, and the teachers do it as well through Naviance. So who sends what? And that's what I was saying kind of leads into this a little bit. So the counselors, we are responsible for sending the transcript. So we're going to send, if they're applying early action, we're going to send the first initial transcript. And that is going to have basically up until the end of junior year grades. Sometimes we'll try to cut it in to get at least first quarter grades on there. So it depends on if they have early deadlines, we might not, but most of the time we can get that first quarter grade senior year on there. Then we send mid-year grades, and then we send final grades only to the school that they choose to go to. So just so you know, we're not sending third term grades, but those other 3 transcripts we will send. We send the school profile, and that tells the colleges about Oliver Ames and what we have here. We send our letter of recommendation, and we send a secondary school report form. The teacher is only going to send their letter of recommendation. The student is responsible for the application, and that definitely needs to be in by the deadline date. Our stuff can be a little late sometimes if things are backing up and things like that, but the application has to be in by that deadline date. They need to pay the fee. Colleges, the applications run from $50 to about $100, somewhere in there per school. It can be expensive. I know we've oftentimes mentioned at our Common App meetings, workshop, that if you get fee waivers in the mail, because especially once you start taking those standardized tests, you're on every college's mailing list in the world. So keep an eye on that. In fact, it was funny, just yesterday, I have a senior myself, so I'm living this as well, at home as well here, and he received a letter from Stonehill College with a fee waiver in it. I was like, oh, let me set that aside in case he decides he wants to apply there. So kind of keep an eye on that. Also, they should check their email for the email that they're getting from the colleges. So they'll have to pay that fee, they have to do their essay, and they have to send their SAT or ACT scores if they are sending their scores. And the way that they do that is they go to those websites. They go to the SAT website or the ACT website, and you pay to send those scores to the schools. Because we can't send them, they're not official from us. So if the schools are going to require them, they're going to have to come from the College Board or ACT to go straight to those schools. So just to kind of let you know, because I feel like every year we have people who get confused with that, and the student shows up in our office saying, but I thought you were sending my scores. We're like, no.
Well, they also think if they list them on Common App that they're...
Yeah, and they sometimes think if they're self-reporting within the Common App, that counts. And I mean, to be honest, for some schools, they will at least do an initial review with that, but they're going to need the proof because they can't quite accept everybody's say for what their scores are. Just a little cover on what deadlines are, because I know this can be confusing. Early decision. So that one is, we tend to use it very sparingly because it is a binding contract. Basically, the student is saying if they're applying early decision to a school, they're saying, I promise, if you let me in, I will go to your school. And I'm going to go no matter how little financial aid you give me or anything else. I am promising I'm going to go there. The student signs off. The counselor signs off, and a parent signs off. So we're all promising that that student is going to go to that school. So we use it very sparingly. Sometimes student athletes who are committed to schools, that is part of the deal, and that can be normal. But otherwise, it's something that if you're feeling pretty confident, your entire family has gone to Princeton, and this child wants to go to Princeton, that's the one and only place they want to go, then feel free to do early decision. It does increase your chances a little bit of getting into a school. It does have that effect, but you just have to be prepared for, if they do get in, what that might mean, financially for your family and things like that. And you don't get to find out all the other places you get into, which I think is part of the fun personally. Early action, you get the enjoyment of finding out early, oftentimes by December, January, with none of the commitment. You still have until May 1st to decide. You can take your time and think about it. I often recommend to my students to, if not apply to all their schools early if they have it, at least some, so that they've got a couple acceptances in their back pocket around, the holiday time, because it can make the rest of the year a little more relaxing if you're going somewhere. It brings that tension level down a little bit. Regular decision, like I was saying, it's like, January, February deadlines, sometimes can even run into the spring, you have some later ones. They're great. Personally, I tell my students to still try to get your applications in by the end of December, even if you're doing regular decision, because I think about the last thing a student wants to do in January when they come back after the holidays is to, in the midst of mid-years, and it's dark and snowy and miserable, is to be getting college applications out at that time. So I usually recommend, even if you're going regular decision, get them done by the end of December. And then rolling admissions. And the idea of rolling admissions is the college just opens it up and they start reviewing people and they accept and deny and accept until they get full. So what's great about that is sometimes they can go much farther into the, could go all the way to summer sometimes, depending if they haven't filled their class. But they can fill a class and they often will hand out financial aid as they're going. So they could run out of financial aid by the time they get to you. So again, we're pushing by getting things done the end of fall or early winter to kind of get ahead of everything. We put on here, and it is in your handout, the Massachusetts State University admission standards, because we do have so many students applying to the UMasses or like Bridgewater and those schools. So you can see that they require 4 courses in English, 4 in math, 3 in science, 2 in social studies, including 1 in US history, 2 courses in foreign language, and at least 2 electives. Luckily, the graduation requirements for Olive Reams are this and then some. So typically, you are more than covered these subjects. It is usually not a problem. Our students are required 3 years of social studies, so they're going to have that. They will have at least a minimum of 3 years of science, and the math and English match up perfectly. Foreign language is not a graduation requirement here at OA. And I know we do have sometimes students who, because of possibly special education issues, might not take a foreign language, and that is fine. There are instances where, and we will oftentimes write about that in our letter to the school as well. And then also we put in there, so you're able to see the kind of GPA requirements as opposed to the SAT, ACT. And it's kind of like a little weight here where it's like the higher your GPA, the less high of an SAT you need, and vice versa. But they certainly, they have the requirements to be, and you want to be able to see what the requirements are to get into those schools. It also can be a little more dependent on the school and also the major you're applying to. So whereas they might say, okay, we will admit somebody with a 2.51, we can tell you that UMass Amherst, oftentimes it's harder to get in than that. And also selective majors. Most schools tend to have selective majors. So UMass Amherst has like business, computer science, engineering, nursing. Those students need a 3.8 GPA minimum to get into those programs. So, which I always find parents always laugh if they themselves went to UMass. They're always like, what? Like, yeah, it's really hard to get into UMass now. So it's just something to consider when your student's applying. All right, I think I am handing off to Mr. Fitzgerald, who I will warn you, loves to talk. He's a chatty man, but he's the best.
I only have 3 slides, so they knew in advance that I am a talker. So I have the pleasure of talking to you guys about finances, which truthfully can be a whole presentation unto itself. And actually, there are multiple opportunities later this fall to get some more specific and specialized help with regards to the financial aid process. But we did want to take a couple of minutes just to cover kind of in general what financial aid is and kind of the different ways in which your child might get financial aid, both from colleges directly and then from outside opportunities throughout the school year. And just from our perspective, the college application process is really a 2-step process. So most of the conversation up until now, and kind of the priority right now is applying for admission, right? Applying to the colleges, having your child applying to the colleges to be admitted. The second step in that process, though, is applying for financial aid, so that if admitted, they're receiving as much financial aid to help pay for college before, like we talked about, as long as they're not applying via early decision, that they're getting their acceptances, they're getting their financial aid offers. As a family, you'll be able to compare that information before then ultimately making a decision on what makes the most sense for your child. We, in our conversations with your seniors, will talk to them about the cost of attending college and how much college is based on their sticker price, what they reasonably might expect to see with regards to financial aid offers, and then we are more than happy to continue talking to them and trying to help them understand what those financial aid offers are from the colleges once they've been admitted and once they hear back with the detailed information about what the colleges are willing to offer them to help pay for school. But essentially, financial aid from the colleges, which is where most of the financial aid students receive comes from, breaks down into two categories. There's need-based aid and merit-based aid. And so merit-based aid essentially is offered to students if they're admitted and they're deemed to be meritorious. In other words, they are particularly strong applicants to that school, regardless of financial circumstances. So oftentimes that comes directly with the acceptances, and usually it comes in the form of scholarships. So colleges your child will get their acceptance letter, and within the acceptance letter it will say, congratulations, you've been accepted, and you're eligible or able to be the recipient of, and then it's usually a very fancy titled scholarship name that's typically renewable for the 4 years of their college experience at that school, as long as they meet sort of certain benchmarks along the way, maintaining a certain GPA, maintaining a full course load, things of that nature. In addition to that, they may also receive need-based financial aid. Now, need-based financial aid is determined based on your child's determined need to pay for college. And how colleges calculate need is through a couple of different tools, but primarily through a website called Fafsa, which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So if your child is going to be applying for need-based aid, you and they will be required to complete the Fafsa. You cannot complete the Fafsa until October 1st. That's when it becomes live for our current senior class. And essentially what the Fafsa is going to do, it's going to determine your family's ability to pay for your child's first year of college based on your last year's tax returns. So you don't need to wait to file your taxes for this upcoming year. It's essentially going to ask you a whole bunch of information pulling from your previous year's tax filings. And based off of that, it will provide your child something called an EFC, or an expected family contribution. I will warn you in advance, if you are new to this process, it will be far higher than what you think it should be. Because truthfully, it's as much a debt calculation tool as it is a calculation of your family's ability to pay for college out of pocket that upcoming year. But it will give just a number, and it will say this is your contribution amount, regardless of what college your child is going to. So I, not being the strongest of math people, like to do this in round numbers. So if the EFC that the FAFSA provides your child is $10,000, that's the number, regardless of whether your child is choosing to go to a state college, which likely, especially in Massachusetts, has a lower cost of attendance compared to a private college. What that means is your child's need would be greater at that private college because it has that higher cost of attendance. Now, just because your child and you as a family need more money to go to that more expensive college, the colleges oftentimes don't guarantee that they'll meet your child's need. They certainly will try. But that need-based financial aid offer might come in the form of loans, potentially something called work study, which is the promise of employment on campus that the college is then assuming your child will put back towards their tuition bills. And also potentially certain grants, which which also tend to be money that is not expected to be paid back, but might not necessarily be guaranteed for all 4 years. It might be sort of a year-by-year calculation. And then all of that is packaged together to be your child's financial aid offer. When your child gets their financial aid offer, it's definitely worth sitting down with them and really looking through it, because a lot of colleges are really good about this. Some aren't quite as good at it, or are kind in how they present it, and they might just say, congratulations, you have $50,000 in financial aid to our school. And it might be close to $50,000 in loans, which is not nearly the same thing as a much higher number in scholarship money, right? So one financial aid offer of $50,000 to one school and another financial aid offer of $50,000 to a second school could be very different in the details and how that financial aid offer is actually being presented to your child. And sometimes kids especially, they just see like, it's a big number and they get really excited, and it's before they get too excited. We definitely want that conversation with you all to be part of their college decision-making process. Ultimately, it is not our say, and we will not say to them what is and what is not too much money to pay towards college. That's ultimately a family decision, but we certainly will be telling them that should be part of the conversation, and we really encourage them to have that be part of the decision. So I mentioned every school needs the Fafsa. Some schools, and this tends to be exclusively private schools, although not all of them, may also need a second form offered through College Board called the CSS Profile. The CSS Profile asks a lot of similar information as the Fafsa, but in a little bit more detail, and actually allows you to provide a little bit more of a narrative to your financial circumstances, if there is potentially a narrative to your financial circumstances. And so in some ways, it can be actually helpful in the process if perhaps the FAFSA makes it seem like your family has more, a greater ability to pay for college than actually the reality of your circumstances it ends up being the case. So the frustrating answer is the best way to really know exactly what every college needs in regards to financial aid and the deadline that they would have is to go to their financial aid website on their school website, where they will very explicitly tell you what they will need from your child and from you if your child is going to be applying for financial aid at their school. And just like the application for admissions that oftentimes have multiple deadlines, there oftentimes are multiple deadlines to apply for financial aid. You might see that a school has a priority deadline that essentially they're saying, if you want to be considered for all of the scholarship money that is available for our next year's freshman class, make sure that you submit all our financial aid forms by this deadline. And other schools might say, if you want to receive a financial aid offer around the same time as your admissions decision, especially if you're applying early, make sure that you submit your financial aid award or your financial aid information around this time. And oftentimes it can be a little earlier in the process than families might anticipate. Usually it's after the admissions deadlines, but perhaps not much later. So as your children are really probably kind of stressing, hopefully not, but maybe about the admissions process, definitely a benefit that you all can offer to them is just helping them better understand, or just being aware for them, what the financial aid parts of the process are going to be, so that if they're being admitted, that ultimately they're receiving as much financial aid from the colleges as they potentially could be receiving. In addition to the money that they would be getting from the colleges, there are other scholarships that they are able to apply for over the course of senior year. So there are several scholarship search engines that exist where your children can create accounts and profiles free of cost, and then it just generates a list of colleges scholarships rather, that they could apply to if they so chose. And then those scholarship applications feel pretty similar to the college applications. A lot of them exist on websites that we're already familiar with, so the Common App has one, College Board has one, Naviance has one, and then Mrs. Carney has been so kind to update. We have a financial aid portion of our guidance webpage with several other search engines. available in there as well. They tend to pull from a lot of the same information, so I don't know if your child's going to do this, they only need to really do it on one. There's not a great benefit of creating like 6 or 7 scholarships or retention accounts, because you're just going to be getting a lot of redundant information. I see some smiles, so perhaps someone that's already done this. So that is one step in the process. And if your child is applying for outside scholarships, they oftentimes may be asked to get school information, their transcript, letters of recommendation. We are not automatically notified of that, so please encourage them to let us know whatever they need and however they need it submitted, and we will happily do that for them on their behalf so that they're able to apply for those outside scholarships. Similarly, we are made aware of more local scholarships over the course of the year. We have a very colorful display in the guidance office that essentially are pockets next to a big word, scholarships. And so as those come to us, we put those actual paper applications to scholarships on in the actual guidance office, and then we post that information in the scholarships, the local scholarship section of Naviance over the course of the school year. And sometimes those local scholarships that are not necessarily OA specific, but might be somewhat unique to the Easton area, are great ones for your children to apply for. They might not be for quite as much money, but you're also potentially, your child is applying for scholarships against a much smaller applicant pool. And to me, that's a great way to kind of increase their chances of receiving some amount of additional scholarship money. Similarly, we have a lot of children and students that notify us of local scholarships that they are eligible for by way of you all, right? So if you, as their parents or guardians, work at a place that offers scholarships to dependents. If I know Big Y, as an example, offers a scholarship if you are a member of Big Y. Like, so if you have local affiliations that you are some way connected to, and there's scholarship opportunities for your seniors by way of those connections, definitely encourage your children to apply for those. Strongly make them apply for those, and then have them let us know so that we're submitting whatever else they need to be ultimately considered for those outside scholarships. And then lastly, to anyone who's had a senior go through the process before, there are a ton of OA-specific scholarships that are available to our graduating seniors that are given out on class night, which ends up being the same week as graduation, just during the week. It is a wonderful evening. There's a ton of local businesses, local booster organizations, and families and members within the community that ultimately create and provide scholarships exclusively to our graduating seniors. That list from last year is available on the financial aid section of our OA website. Mrs. Smock, amongst the many other things that she does, will spend the better part of this year communicating with the donors from last year, confirming the information for your seniors, and then that information will be made available to the current seniors and to you all in the spring to have them apply for those scholarships as well. And if they only apply for one additional scholarship beyond the financial aid directly from the colleges, it should be those local, those OA-specific scholarships. There's typically over 100 scholarships. We have a class of less than 300 kids. There's great odds that your child, if they're going to apply to several, may well receive one or more than one. And then lastly, there are several I mentioned earlier, people much more knowledgeable than me, that are able to offer additional help and support, especially if this is your first time through the process. MIFA, which is the Massachusetts Education Financing Authority, has several resources available to families free of cost throughout the fall. We would encourage you to go to MIFA's website. Most notably, there is an event called Fafsa Day, or the Fafsa Festival, where you can actually register. They will give you several local locations where you could sign up for, and they would tell you essentially what to bring. And essentially it's your tax information from last year, and they will sit down with you. Usually it's a financial aid representative from a college are typically the people that facilitate this. and actually fill out the FAFSA with you and your child in real time and actually submit it, so that it's just one less thing you all have to worry about. It's a wonderful resource that quite frankly is underutilized. And so I would kind of make a strong pitch to consider it if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed or the kind of the initial process of filling out the FAFSA is a little daunting. And then just one last piece of information that's not on the slides. Every college on their financial aid website also has a tool called a net price calculator. And what that will do, while not guaranteed, you can put in your child's academic information and some basic financial information about your child and you all. And it will give you a estimation of the likely financial aid offer your child would receive from that school. And it doesn't guarantee admission, it doesn't even guarantee that's going to be the exact financial aid offer, but it tends to be fairly accurate, or pretty darn close to accurate. And so if you're kind of, especially if you're kind of early on looking for a gauge of like, what might you expect to see, definitely the net price calculator tools are really helpful. If your child is thinking of applying early decision, and the cost of attendance is kind of a big variable in whether or not it makes sense to apply early decision or not, I would definitely go and use the net price calculator tool for that particular college, just to kind of gauge what you would hope to see, or what you might reasonably expect to see in regards to financial aid from the college if admitted. And certainly along the way, if you, as parents and guardians, or if your children directly have any questions about the financial aid parts of the process, definitely know we're available for those questions as well. Like was mentioned before, kind of the focus in the fall is really kind of helping them navigate the application for admissions part of the process, because that is daunting in and of itself, and tends to be priority number one. But we don't want to, by any means, gloss over the financial aid part of the process. I have 3 myself, and my oldest is 8, and I am already graying rapidly at the thought of higher education. So, you know, there's been a lot of conversation about college debt and kind of how that is impacting people and what steps the federal government are taking to mitigate college debt. But certainly, we would want kind of as your children are entering into the college experience and potentially getting to go through the process of determining kind of what amount of college debt makes sense for them, if any, to just feel as informed as possible about kind of what that looks like for them and how much it makes sense for them relative to kind of your family circumstances. And with that, hopefully I have not completely stressed you out, but in the event that I have, Mrs. Lukovich is going to talk for a minute about just the special ed part of the process, and then hopefully bring us home and kind of add a little bit of calmness and levity to the conclusion of this.
We'll all do yoga at the end. So I hope that you're not overwhelmed, because this is really actually at its core a simple process. We all, a lot of us, apply to college, and I think a lot of hype is around it, and some of that is very false. Everyone gets into college. If you don't get in the place you want to go, you'll get in another place. If you don't have the GPA because you didn't have a great high school experience, you can start at one school and you can transfer to another. You could start at the community college for a semester. Then under the Massachusetts transfer program, for example at Massasoit, you can save a lot of money, and then you can transfer automatically accepted to any Massachusetts state college with, I think it's a 2.0 or a 2.5 and above. So there are lots of ways to go to college, and some of the places the kids apply, it's 5 minutes of bragging rights, and they didn't get any money, but it's up to us as the adults to bring everybody down to reality. And not to be a downer, but to be realistic about it. Kids don't understand money. They'll say, oh, my mom will co-sign these huge loans for me. Maybe your mom is being reasonable because she knows what a mortgage is and she knows what a car payment is. I have 3 kids who are now grown up, so I'm on the other side of this now, and the loans have been paid. But I think we have to say, for most families, is it worth it to spend $200,000 to $300,000 for this college because my kid says he wants it? If you have it, and that's great. Most of us don't have it, so most of us have to make a decision. You can go there if you get appropriate scholarships. And the kids will say, I'll just take a loan. But that's not a reasonable thing, really, because it's like you owe so much money and you owe it quickly. And the way I put it to kids is, you know, do you want to come back home and not be able to rent an apartment? Do you want to buy a car? Do you want to go to graduate school? All these kind of practical things, because the big number is meaningless to them. If you have a child on an IEP, individual education plan, we do not automatically send that information. You'd have to ask us to send it, and we usually just send it to the college that the student decides on attending. Some exceptions to that are the Latch program at Massasoit, the Palace program at Curry, and a specific LDP program at Westfield State. They ask for the IEP up front. Most schools do not. 504, the same thing. If you choose to get those services as a student, once you're admitted, you just bring that with you when you go to college, and you just walk in and you present it to the Office of Disability Services, and they will generally provide similar accommodations to what the kids are getting here at high school. If you have a student athlete and you're interested in playing a sport in college, they'll have to register with NCAA through the clearinghouse, which is a very simple process. And then they just let us know once they've done that, and then we will upload a transcript for them onto the website. And they also will need to send their SAT scores, because that's a requirement of NCAA. Anybody who has questions about that, just email the school counselor. So tips for dealing with senior stress. This is a poor senior with their head down. You all know your kids better than anybody else. We just listen to them. You just tell them to see their school counselor if they have questions. Stress is not always bad. It can definitely be a good motivator. There's a lot of talk about stress and anxiety in society today, and it's absolutely a very real thing, more than it's ever been. But it doesn't mean you can't function and you can't move forward and you can't apply to college and you can't keep up your grades, and you're not going to just close your door and avoid it all, because we're not going to let you do that. So reach out to us and we'll be happy to talk to the students. Some of the remarks that I get, and I know the other counselors get too, when they come into your office and they sit down and you say, okay, you're going to do these 3 things, and you break it down, they say, this is so much easier than I thought. Because it really is. It's kind of almost like filling out a job application. The only hard part about applying to college is the coordination of all the stuff. You go on the websites, but it's technical, and it's not hard. The only thing that takes any real thought would be writing your essay. And it's 500 to 650 words. You can really write about anything. One of the choices on the Common App is topic of your own choice. You could even take an essay that you've written for English class, that you got an A on, that the teacher thought was really great. You can use that as your college essay. You can adapt it, you can edit. It doesn't have to be why I want to go to this college. It can just be about something funny. My 3 kids wrote about 3 completely different things. They just want to have a good piece of writing to show that you can write, and hopefully to maybe see a little bit of a feeling of what kind of person you are, what kind of student you're going to be. Just a little bit of yourself showing through in the essay. And our English teachers here are great about helping with that. So I would definitely advise the kids to reach out to them. They really can do this. This is it's not as hard as society has made it appear to be. It's become a business and an industry, but it's really just a bunch of applications. Let's, bring it down to what it actually is. Work with us, we'll work with your students, we keep everybody on track. And senior year is stressful, but it should be fun too. First term grades are important, and we want the kids to do well the first term because those grades do go. If they didn't have a great year junior year, they can choose to wait and apply after first term grades. Kind of a benchmark I use for that, and I think a lot of us do, is if you have a GPA of a 3.0 or above, you really are probably okay to apply for early action to most schools. But if you have a lower one and you want to prove that you're still solid and that you're improving, you might wait for the first quarter of senior year grades to come out. And what we hear from college admissions offices is that they often count that, they recalculate the GPAs for everyone, but they often count that 4 times over. So they're saying, well, this kid's still trying in its senior year, so we're going to calculate this. A lot of the colleges really want to find a way to accept you. One other note I would have about for some of our very higher end students, some kids can get on a tear of applying to only Ivy League schools, and then they'll toss one in that they don't really like. You've got to have some schools that you'll be happy with, that you really can get into. And unfortunately, we can't, no matter how great the student is, if you're the valedictorian, we could never say with any certainty that they will get into one of those Ivies, even if they apply to 10. Because every kid who's applying to those schools, you're all competing against each other. And particularly if a bunch of them are in New England, they might be looking for a kid from California or Nebraska. So really, if you have a student like that that's on the very high end, have them expand their list. There are lots of other good schools too that are not Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Brown, So we want to add some other schools that would I think you're going to get in there. This is a solid one, okay? Also, financial safeties are very important. I really kind of personally believe that everyone should, unless again, if you're wealthy or you have that rich uncle, you should add some state colleges on there. UMass Amherst, there are 4 great UMasses, UMass Dartmouth, UMass Lowell, UMass Boston. Then we have, how many state schools? We have 6, 8, 9. I have Worcester, Framingham, Bridgewater. Just tons of great schools that are at a much lower price point.